Welcome to the Pinelander Podcast, the official podcast of Pineland, broadcasting to you from an undisclosed location deep inside Pineland, where we discuss faith, family, finances, firearms, freedom, food, and everything else in between, with those who believe in living free and living out the values that made this country free. All right, welcome to the Pinelander Podcast. My name is Paula Favor. I'm here with my Ranger buddy, Mike Blackburn, and we're coming to you from an undisclosed location deep within Pineland. This is the podcast for America's Warriors. Today we're talking about leadership in special operations with retired Command Sergeant Major Terry Peters, former Command Sergeant Major of 3rd Special Forces Group, former Team Sergeant of 5th Group's ODA 545, and founder and CEO at Leader Solutions and Decision Support, LLC. Sergeant Major, welcome.
Paul, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be with you and the team.
Awesome. So Terry, amongst other fields, you're a recognized expert, I would say, in leadership. And we know that that's a field of endeavor that is crucial to the success of any unit. And now that you've seen a lot over your decades of service, both in the Army and as you continue to serve in all of the fields of endeavor that you have, as you see things now, what would you say, just to kind of break the ice here, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that the SF regiment is facing right now for leaders?
Paul, thanks. What a great icebreaker. So I do have the privilege and honor sometimes of spending time with several leaders in many organizations inside the regiment, and when I spend time with them, I'm often a student of the environment to ask a lot of questions and learn. And so I'll tell you what I've kind of derived from those conversations and my own observations. I think the number one challenge we face is really retaining talent, and that there's a bigger part of this, which is attracting, recruiting, selecting, and then delivering great talent into the formation, and then keeping that talent engaged and focused and committed to the organization for the long haul. We have seen, over the last 2 to 3 years, I've seen phenomenal leaders with a whole lot of legs left under them, if you will, in their potential to serve in uniform. And they've exited for various reasons. So I think, that arguably the number one challenge we face is talent and talent management for the long haul. And that's a leader issue, right? I mean, it really is something leaders are focused on. There is no magic bullet, if you will, that will solve it, but it is an area that leaders in special forces, in SOF, and many leaders in the organizations that I work with on a daily basis are dealing with and are trying to solve perpetually.
Yeah, those are definitely a myriad of problems, myriad of challenges. I mean, just from my layman's standpoint, I retired as a team sergeant, and I've been privileged to work out at Camp McCall since 2010. And we've been in some of the same buildings, and we've seen some of the same problems. But my take, I mean, I completely agree with what you just said, and that's enlightening to me. And I've just been seeing not only a recruitment issue, but also retention issue. And so that raises a lot. I mean, those are a lot of challenges for leaders, just there.
And when you think about retention, right? When you start figuring out, you sit with guys and gals and you ask them, why are you leaving? There's, we're working through this period in the history of SOF and special forces, in my mind, where, we're coming out of, a significant period of long-term conflict. We are working hard to get back to, with respect to mission application, where we were prior to 9/11, which is a whole lot more, JSETs and training missions and those types of things. And that's been, in some instances, that's been tough for people to transition with the times. And in other cases, in recruiting specifically, in many of our recruiting marketing, if you will, is still focused in many ways to that kinetic fight that we were all involved in, for so long. And part of this is just how are we really letting people know the dynamic job of special forces, and why is there just intrinsic value associated with applying yourself in that job. And then the other piece of this that gets to that is once you're in and serving, you know, our folks are addicted to adrenaline and travel and all the excitement that is part of being in special forces. And in these times where, these are more prolonged, protracted engagements in countries, sometimes it's just not as sexy, for lack of a better term, as some of the work that we've done in the past. And folks, they really just kind of want, or I think they, in many instances, are just trying to figure out how do they fit into the puzzle. And this, again, is critical for leaders to understand and manage that talent and make sure that we're putting people into the right job and being selfless with career goals. If Paul and Terry work together and Terry's happy in this unit and wants to stay in it, then he should. And if Paul says, hey, I'd like to go try out for something else, or I want to do something else, then the leadership has to encourage that for the greater good of the service and service to the nation, versus trying to be restrictive or align talent to a certain job or function when there's really more opportunity for that person if we just open our aperture for them.
Yeah. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, Terry, thanks for coming on. I know we've been trying to get you on the podcast for quite a while. I think you are, in your style of leadership, is the correct style and the correct type of leadership for today's challenges. And the reason why I say that is because you do ask questions. You are inquisitive. You do enjoy the learning process, and I think that's one of the things that I've always admired about you. Was you come into a room and you ask more questions than you dictate, and you've always been that way. I had the pleasure of coming out to SWIC back when you were out there at SUT, and I don't know if you remember the times, but SWIC was kind of short personnel, and it wasn't uncommon at all for cadre within SWIC to kind of lean over and help other committees out. And
Right.
I came out to Camp McCall on a number of occasions just to help out with SUT and what have you. And Master John Utley. I mean, there's a bunch of names I can, that I'm sure you remember. And it was a great experience for me because there was a sort of environment of trying to do the best that we could as a team. And you were always the guy that was asking questions like, how do we do this and how do we do that? And I think I was very impressed with the product that we had at the time out there. And, of course, when Paul and I worked together at SUT, it was not uncommon to see you pop into the patrol base and sit down with the students and just ask questions on how things were going and try to put your finger on the pulse. With that being said, how much of this is kind of generational? And the reason why I bring that up is because we see there seems to be a kind of a need for instant gratification and excitement, more so in the younger generations than maybe in my generation or your generation, where we could, I guess we got fulfilled in a different capacity, in a different way. Whereas now it's kind of like you mentioned the adrenaline rush. And it seems like that is almost like really the challenge today is trying to keep the adrenaline flowing for these guys. Have you noticed that?
Yeah. One, Mike, thanks for the walk down memory lane really quickly there. That was good for me. And I think I'll talk about the habit that I gained a long time ago of just asking a lot of questions. You guys know my bio. I've had some pretty catastrophic failures in my career, and at one point in my life, I was doing exactly what the Army told me, which was, ask people, are you doing okay? Do you need anything? And I found that people would always say, "No, I'm good and I don't need anything." And often that would turn out bad. And so over time, I started refining the questions that I would ask. And then I found that the other critical ingredient is just to be genuine and be present, right? So that one-on-one time, or one-on group time, or whatever it was, I've never felt like I've had all the answers, and I've never tried to apply that for quite some time. I would say as a as a young E7, before some folks got my mind right, I would say I was probably as far off the rails as you could get with respect to what I thought leadership was and what I was doing. But this ability to, after you get some really great people around you and they teach you and you adopt a mindset, that ability to learn is so vital, because through the collective is how you solve problems. But to your point, our world has changed, I mean, it has changed in so many ways. And one of those is that much of what people are doing now is posted online for other people to see and judge. And there is a return on that, intrinsically in some cases. A brilliant friend of mine will talk about dopamine and all of the effects of that on your brain. But there really is something to that instant gratification piece. And I think, since we're talking about leadership, I think leaders have a real requirement from the first time you interact with talent to really set the conditions for what type of environment they're going to work in, and then really influence through persistent presence and through how you establish your organization's culture, to let them know that so much of what we do is behind the scenes and will never be noticed and never be spoken of, at least in open circles. And I think that's part of a leader's requirement, to say, we want a certain type of person here, who has these attributes and character traits, and we are going to expect you to apply those day in and day out. Assessment and selection does an incredible job of, no kidding, finding the right raw talent for us. And then over time, a person gets to group or gets to their operational assignment. And some of those critical assessments, aren't as consistent as they used to be with respect to feedback and some of those things. So people begin to drift, and expectations begin to shape and change. And without, again, persistent leadership interactions, then people will begin to write their own narrative or try to pull the organization in a different direction. And I think that's why, getting a bench of leaders who is focused on, speaking to that talent, managing it, and ensuring that, the people that we're retaining are those people who may not need that instant gratification, but are those people who understand the greater good that special forces specifically is undertaking every day, is really long-term 25-year change in locations, which we've seen repeated success at. That's the things that we've got to make sure that we're on message with, and we're also making sure that we're speaking to that effect over time, so that we can reduce that sheer need for instant gratification, adrenaline, those types of things.
Well, I think that I hate to use instant gratification, because I'm not sure if that's really the proper label, because I think there's other ways where these warriors get gratification, and I think one of it is just contributing, and I think when you talked about you mentioned the fact that if a guy has a goal or a desire to do something else, okay, maybe he wants to take the long walk, for instance, or whatever. Maybe he's in the 82nd Airborne Division and he wants to go to selection, okay? It used to be in the old days, and maybe still is today, I don't know, but it used to be that guy was almost considered a traitor within that unit. How dare you want to better yourself? How dare you want to do something besides, work in this little slot that we have, ranged for you. And I do think you're absolutely correct when you say that the military, as a large organization, really has to embrace these guys that want to go slay the dragon, want to climb the cliff, and encourage them and let them chase their ambition, because it all benefits us in the long run anyway. We shouldn't be pigeonholed, various warriors, especially when it's so hard to recruit them anyway, and equally as hard to retain them. Are we doing a better job at that now? are we encouraging our Warriors to be, all that they can be and contribute to the team and try to squeeze as much as we can out of these guys so they feel like they're a part of the process?
I will tell you, Mike, I think we certainly are. And I'll give you a couple of snapshots in time. Several years ago, Mark Eckert was the Army Special Operations Command, CSM. I ran across a soldier who just had a challenge and was directly related to retention. And so I sent Mark an email and said, hey, I'm not sure if you've got the time. This is an each kind of issue, and you're sitting, at Starfleet level. Will you take an interest in this and help solve it? And the response was instantaneous because, and I saw this, I've seen this repeatedly since then, but, leaders are really hyper focused on, how do we manage that talent and how do we let them, get the most out of this opportunity to serve the nation. And what I have seen is just a genuine interest in, talent management, solving problems that are impeding performance, any of those types of things. And it is significantly better across the spectrum of people I interact with than it was a few years ago. You might have one or two leaders who felt that way, who were selfless in the way that they really manage their talent. But now I see it, just significantly more widespread than I've ever seen it before in my life. And I think it speaks to just how much people care. And the other factor that I see is just, how little rank there is in some of the interactions that I've observed. I was recently out at Camp McCall, and the Center and School CSM, Lee Strong, who I think is just a phenomenal leader. I mean, top 1%, top a half of 1% of leaders I've interacted with over the last 15 years at least. Lee walks into a room full of cadre and really just spends time with them. And he's just talking with them as adults. And, he's not in any way anything other than someone who has a responsibility for the center and school. And he's asking questions. He's given his perspective. He's listening intently. He's taking notes. And to watch that humble process of leadership being applied, one speaks to that human, but he's also, in that moment, he's influencing, an entire generation of leaders next, right? And so I'm seeing more and more of those types of things that are happening, and just the ability to really take an interest in the person in front of you versus this assumption that, in the past, I think may have been there, that this person's always going to be here, or we'll get another one that looks just like them and they'll fill the spot. And now, the numbers are too finite. The recruiting pool is too finite. And so this genuine care about that human and their families is just widespread. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's a general officer, an E7, or anyone in between. There is this care that kind of permeates the organization in a way that I think is better than it's ever been. Because there was a point where, we'd say it, but, we cared about your family when you had an issue. But the rest of the time, we were just trying to work you really hard and get every mile we could out of you. And now I think, you see this very widespread, this genuine concern for the formation, the greater good, people and their families. And I think that's a winning set of methodologies that's being applied.
Well, you bring up something else too, and I came in. I went to selection in '88. I hate to date myself. But during that time, basically from 1990 through all the 1990s, and of course rolling into our involvement in Iraq and Afghanistan, there was a big push to grow SOF as quickly as we could because there was a demand. There was a lot of things going on. It was not uncommon for guys in the community to basically be living in places like Afghanistan. I mean, they'd come home for a little while, they'd repack, and bam, they're back in Afghanistan again. Very busy. We got as big as we could to try to meet that demand. And of course, now we're seeing the articles on, maybe it's time to shrink SOF. And maybe it is. Maybe it's time to get small again, start focusing on those core competencies. The world certainly isn't any safer. What are your thoughts on that? If we have a shrinking pool, is it maybe unrealistic to think that we're going to be able to maintain as large of a soft presence as we currently have in today's realities?
Yeah, it's a great question and a great thread of discussion. I think, with respect to size of our formations, I think the math equation itself is gonna derive a smaller amount of people who are operationally capable inside the SF and USASOC formations. And that's just because of throughput of courses, and the natural life cycle of people in uniform. So I think that's going to happen, and I think we're gonna see what that looks like over time, because I'm happy to report that standards in Special Forces School, Civil Affairs course, PSYOP courses, they haven't went down. If anything, they've gone up over the last 3 to 5 years that I've had some hands on it and been able to observe and ask hard questions. And so I will tell you that that person who graduates, that operator who graduates any of those courses, they are at entry level plus when they come to a formation. But the reality is, in many of our pipelines, the numbers just aren't being produced to a sustainable number to keep all of the formations full. And so I think we're going to see a dwindling number of formations, icons, if you will. Teams will be, I think, potentially back to 5 or 4 in a team room. And I know there's some restructure going on, from the USAC commander's guidance to see what that may look like as far as icons. But the sheer number of operators that are going to be ready and deployable, I think, is less. And so that requires, at strategic levels, this critical scrutiny of, is this a soft and or special forces mission, before we just raise our hand and say, yes, we'll do it, right? Because that's one of the things that we have done forever. One of the things that fueled growth was, you just sprinkle some soft on it, special forces or whoever, you sprinkle them on it, and they're going to be able to solve a problem, because we have incredibly brilliant people who are adaptive thinkers, and they're in high demand. Now we're going to have to, I think, if I'm advising senior leaders, they're going to really have to think through, is this a soft mission, probably to more detail than we've had to do in quite some time, so that we're not, using our talent in places and in ways that's not the best use of that strategic resource. And I think that's something that's going to take a lot of time. And I think, if you're an E7 or an E8 out there listening to this, your voice matters, right? And that's the critical piece that I would tell anyone. Leaders do their best to make decisions based off the strategic inputs, but they also need, in a vital way, the inputs of that person is going to have to apply the sweat equity on the ground to get that back. And that's just, part of building relationship with your leaders and being that person who doesn't shy away from answering questions if you're asked, but no kidding, give professional focused answers to leaders when they're in your presence and ask questions, because that's the best way to keep our entire formation and our organization moving effectively forward.
Yeah, that's spot on. I going back to something you said earlier, I totally agree with you. Lee Strong, one heck of a mile American, great CSM. I'm very happy that he's at the helm there, and something that always, both of you, is just to throw a couple accolades your way, is I think that both of you would say, how things are done is almost as important as what's done. So the
Correct.
How is really important. And so, just little things like, hey, I put on my pants the same way, and just relating to the guys in the room and not having a, us versus them, wall that's there. I think it's so important. And I've picked up on that approach, which I didn't use before. I was, basically a 180 out from what I used to do. So I've learned a lot that way. And then, so I just wanted to make sure that was said. But, and I totally agree with you also, as far as, I say this probably to every Robin Sage class, and that is, you guys you're just like us, in many ways, in most ways, but there's just fewer of you. There's just not as many of you coming to the pipeline. And so I say you're the same cut of cloth, just a loincloth. That's the pun intended. But and I think by this discussion, you've kind of you know made the aperture a little bit smaller when it comes to ideas of this is going to make soft more competitive, more selective, not only on what we do, what we bite off, and what we say we can do, but also I would say more competitive or more challenging when it comes to, because we're going back to the challenges associated with leading at SF, and that is, team sergeants and when they task people, we're going to probably have an 8-man team, maybe not a full 12-man. I mean, I went to Afghanistan with 15 guys. I'm sure you had a full complement of guys, and now you're going to have maybe one medic, maybe one Charlie, and then some of those other MOSs are going to have to double dip. They're going to have, your buddy's going to be, maybe your junior medic will be your Charlie, or who knows. And so you're going to have those other type of challenges associated with that. Yeah, cross training is going to be more important. It's always important. But
it used to be hard to find a 12-man team.
Yeah,
in SF,
we had ghost teams,
almost impossible.
Yeah. But I think
we'll head back that way for sure. And again, I know there's a whole lot of super smart people that are focused on, at the strategic levels all the way through our operational formations and at the tactical level, who are really intent on getting it right. And so that's I've never, in the last 10 years, I haven't met a leader who's out to lunch at all, right? Leaders have different focus. Sometimes commands aren't exactly aligned between the higher echelon and the lower echelon. But what I've seen is everyone is very conscientious of this commodity called human talent, and they don't want to squander it in any way. That doesn't mean we don't have somebody right now sitting on a pallet somewhere in a place where there's no trees or it's just hot or super cold saying, I'm not sure what the hell I'm doing here. But what we do know is that, at some echelon or the other, someone knows exactly why they're putting that talent on the ground. And then the critical piece that is making sure that, what we're asking them to do, why they're there, and then the long-term organizational designs and goals are aligned. And I think that's the piece that, I'm excited to see more conversations, more leader actions around that than I've seen, in many moons, if you will.
I'm going to change topics just a little bit here. We're witnessing, and this is really armed forces wide. I'm not picking on SF by no means, or even the soft community. But a lot of the soldiers, sailors, airmen, coming into the armed forces, I mean, obviously they're coming out of society. And our society is less religious, if you will. Than it has been in decades past, where there's always a strong foundation of kind of right and wrong. And I think a vast majority of the population probably attended church, synagogue, whatever. Came out of sort of religious families. They had sort of a strong foundational upbringing. I remember when I went through basic training in AIT, I mean, we were marched to church every Sunday.
Right.
The military's kind of gotten away from that model. And so I think we're seeing the normal consequence of that, which is, a lot of soldiers are struggling with a lot of, different issues. We're coming out of a long time in Afghanistan, so you got all the PTSD and all the other things associated with that. How important is it for the armed forces today to sort of maybe re-emphasize a belief in something higher than self? And is that a requirement that we need to be instilling in our leadership today?
Yeah, it's a great thread, and I'll try not to get too excited about this one because this came up in a conversation here at the office not too long ago, and someone asked me to draw a compare and contrast joining the military when I joined in the early 80s to what I see now, and of course the difference, a critical takeaway is, when I joined the Army, it was happening to me, and now I'm a spectator to it. So I'll give that caveat to anyone who listens to this and says, you're just absolutely wrong. But when I joined the service, and I went to every recruiter, scored well on tests, and every recruiter had a different pitch, but that pitch all was grounded in, if you've got what it takes to join us, you will be allowed to be part of our formation. And that was very clear, whether it was in the Navy, Marine Corps, Army recruiter, didn't matter. It was, you've got to meet our standard, and if you meet that and you get through all those cuts, then you will be in formation with your peers who've also had to go through that. And there are times when I read an article, or I watch something on TV, or I go to an event and I stand near a formation and I look at some of the things that I see where we don't have a uniform formation. We don't have the standards being applied equally, or any of those types of things. And I think the question I would ask senior leaders are, hey, I know we want the right talent. We're trying to pursue the right talent, but I think we still have a requirement to ensure that they join our team versus us wanting them so bad that we're hiring unicorns. And I think that's a critical piece of tying that to, the values of individuals must align with the values of the organization. And the organization shouldn't accept people into the organization that their values aren't aligned, because if you're not hiring for a culture fit, and part of that is values, then you're going to find yourself being pulled in different directions as an organization, and it's going to ultimately hurt your performance as an organization. And I think, as leaders look at initiatives across the board, or things we're thinking about changing or adjusting, just ensure that we don't lose the criticality that's associated with the trust of the brand of Special Forces, Special Operations, the Army, the Department of Defense. And whenever I open a newspaper and I see something chipping away at that brand that all of us have, sweated and bled over, I think it's something that I worry more about as I get older than I ever did when I was younger, because in the formations that I could see, it was a requirement, and it was very consistent, that you've got to make our cut, and then we'll embrace you as one of our own. And I just, it's an open worry of mine. Do I have anything that says, we're heading off the rails? No. Am I worried about the ability of the armed forces to serve the nation? No. But I do see the brand being chipped away a lot, and I think all of those things are tied together.
No doubt, and that really was going to her. You just paved the way for my question. I would say, and I hope you agree, and I know you agree, is that the attributes of SF, our DNA, are those soft attributes. Professionalism, responsibility, adaptability. See if I can do all this. Courage, team player, integrity, capability, and endurance and perseverance. How important is that then, in light of what you just spelled out? How important is that for leaders to recognize that and keep the brand?
Yeah, I think it's so vital, right? Because when we talk about, and it's also important to understand how the attributes play based off where you are, right? I mean, when you think about your first day on a team, personal responsibility was, right place, right time, right uniform, right? And but when you think about some of the more intricate missions we've got, folks, a singleton, in an embassy, doing some liaison work or whatever that may be, interacting with, senior, in-country officials and host nation officials, personal responsibility takes on a whole new level of meaning. And I think as we, and we always select our talent and move it the right way. But I'll tell you something that I was guilty of, and I see it now periodically, where we just the concept of accountability isn't to the level that I think it ought to be. It's an amazing organization that we work in. I used to give this little story of, it's amazing you could put 10 of us in a helicopter. We could fly 6 hours in that helicopter and dismount, run 7 clicks to an objective, do whatever we needed to do there, get on the plane, get on the helicopter and get lifted out and finish the mission. And we wouldn't spend the time to give each other feedback on those things that mattered, because our loyalty to the individual far eclipsed the greater good or the integrity of the organization. And so I think as we think about, and all these things are interwoven, right? Leadership application, talent management, the standards and values that matter in the RSOF attributes. I think we have to understand that as leaders, our role is to ensure that we are giving the feedback, we are honing the application of those attributes, and we're growing the capabilities of those attributes in people, and we're not compromising ourselves just because we like someone or we want them here, or they have the look or any of those types of things. We want to make sure that every day, day in and day out, those attributes are being applied by the best people on the planet in uniform. And that grows your brand and attracts people to it. And, it self-perpetuates, finding and keeping great people if those attributes are being enforced, aligned, recruited for, and developed over time. And I think this speaks to leader requirements, no matter where they are in the formation. But that, again, I get back to the criticality of that E7, E8 in a team room, that their jobs are just incredibly important to the fabric of the organization, because your internal standards are yours internal standards, and if they're good, fantastic, no one will ever, they'll never be called into question. But if your internal standards and that attribute application isn't aligned with the greater good, we read about it on the front page, or it shows up with a 2 a.m. call of, hey, you're not going to believe this. That's how it manifests itself. And I think that's the critical piece of what leaders have to apply with respect to the attributes, and just making sure that we're not compromising anywhere in the journey of the soldier and the operator. No kidding. Are we selecting and retaining these people with the right attributes, and enforcing them and developing as we go through time?
Yeah, well said.
Well, see, I think there's, and I'm glad we're on this right here, because this is purely anecdotal. Okay, I don't have any data or anything to fall back on here. But when I was working within the Q Corps, and being around the community now, being around these young warriors now that are coming in and filling these ranks and doing the hard job, what I've noticed is, I think it's very easy for us to address all the physical requirements and deal with all the physicalness of the job. And I've never thought that we did a very good job of feeding the emotional, mental needs of these guys, or at least not as good as we ought to be doing. And it seems to me like there's a hunger. Everyone remembers the old commercials maybe of the Marine Corps commercials where the guys, climbing the cliff and slaying the dragon, and he wants to be a Marine. He wants to do something tough, something beyond his own abilities. He wants to see what he can do. But there seems to be a hunger for the other aspect of that, which is, what is it to be a warrior? What are the virtues? What are the ethics? And I'm not sure if the leadership in SOF is real familiar. I mean, we're easy about telling a guy he needs to go down to the gym and work out, and he has to run fast and be able to carry a big ruck. But I'm not sure if we are taking care of the mental and emotional requirements that these guys have as well.
Yeah, and I think it's it's tough, right? Because the physical aspects, as all my friends in the psychology space will tell me, physical aspects are easy to measure, right? They're easy to identify, measure. We can coach through those. The emotional aspects, especially if you're going to embody what you want someone to embrace, requires leaders to be incredibly vulnerable, and it requires them to be very transparent, right? It's tough to get, a senior leader, let's just say a senior E8, E9, to say, let me tell you how I feel and when I feel the most defeated, and what I need to rejuvenate my soul every day, and the things that hurt me emotionally that I'm still struggling with. It's tough, right? It's tough to get to that level of trust and vulnerability, because I think this plays to we still want, and we often, I think, may have a false belief that our leaders and the people that we're selecting ahead of peers, don't need that, right? They're just their iron will and their physical abilities are going to get them through anything. And as we've seen, we've all seen it. We've all seen small dips to catastrophic dips in your mental wellness and focus. We've seen these things, and I think it takes a comprehensive approach by all leaders to speak to it very honestly. I used to give a professional development session on what failure looks like, right? And I went through the mechanics of failure to a point where people lost their lives, and you go through this, and part of that was speaking to the emotional, the place I found myself emotionally, and it was something that no one in my life had ever spoken about. I didn't grow up in an environment where you talked about your feelings, and I didn't grow up in a soft place in the soft formation where people talked about their feelings. It was your focus is on the mission and people, but it's really getting the people ready for the mission. And so I think for leaders to embrace that is a bit of a sea state change, but I think it ties to the other points you've made where values, ethics, that balance of faith and all of those other factors in a human, they deserve a 360 look consistently, so that we can actually work with people to make them the best human possible, and also understand that all of us have challenges that we deal with every day, and you have to look at those with the same tenacity that you'd look at with someone who is stuck at 5 pull-ups versus where we need them to be. So it is a lot because it takes time, and it's squishy, right? I mean, the challenge with many warriors is they want something concrete and something they can sink their hands into, get physical with. This concept of mental health, focus, transparency, all that squishy stuff, and so often it makes people feel uncomfortable. But I would say it is okay to jump into it and really find those professionals who can help you articulate it, and then really get after making your team better and yourself better by understanding and appreciating the circumstances. Dr. Preston Klein and his team wrote an incredible paper on residue, right? And really gives us all perspective on the things that happen to us over time and how that affects us, right? And just makes us who we are and how we can embrace it. And it's a powerful set of work. And if you haven't interacted with Preston Klein, you certainly should, because every time I'm around him, I just feel like one, you feel smarter if you're near him, but when you listen to what he says and the work that his team is doing, it's just incredible work that every operator ought to spend time with. But it is squishy, and I think it takes us a while to really embrace it and get after it. And I'm not sure how we're doing in that space. When I have traveled to I think every group I've visited, and we're doing things like putting human performance and wellness inside and close to all of our physical fitness centers and all the other aspects of this, so that we're, no kidding, looking at the whole operator. When I was out at First Group's area not too long ago, and it's just incredible what's happening out there. When you look at some of those positive constructs that are in place, it really gives you understanding there's a lot of great work going on. And when I talk to the folks at USASOC, HPW, and I see all of those initiatives that they're working for all the right reasons, it inspires me to know that we are really focused on all aspects of the soldier and the operator in that formation, and those people around the operator. And so I'm excited about it, but I think we got a lot of work to do in that space.
Well, here's another observation that I've had, I'm not quite too sure how the community handles this. I've constantly scratched my head trying to figure out how these guys do it. But when I went SF, I was a staff sergeant. I was coming out of a combat arms unit. I had the opportunity to be a complete bonehead, learning leadership at E4, E5, and some E6 levels. team leader, squad leader, and all the rest. And it wasn't pretty. It was a typical 20, 21-year-old leader. A lot of energy and not a lot of brain. But in SF now, I mean, we have the 18 X-ray program. We have a lot of folks that are coming in off the street. Now they're exceptionally smart folks. A lot of them are very talented. But I've always wondered, like, how these guys do that, because I would, the sheer thought of my first leadership position being a team sergeant would terrify me. And I don't know how these guys roll into that type of position without having, the opportunity to make all the mistakes that I made at a very young age, being in charge of others. And I think being a leader today is probably even tougher than it was back in my time. So what are we doing in the community to try to help these guys to where when they finally jump into that leadership position, they're ready?
Those are great questions, and I think, first, to set the context, we are bringing more 18 X-rays into our formation than our active duty enlisted that are coming from the rest of the Army. And so what we're seeing over time is that our force is getting younger, and which adds to, it adds to the complexity of leadership, because, as you both of you remember from being a team sergeant, you look around, you've got people in their mid to late 30s who are natural problem solvers, and you can get them moving in a good direction. Some people on your team are in their 40s. Your team sergeant's been around and had multiple assignments, and that's still happening. But it was easier to move that team and split them up and find those right sub teams to work. So there is that factor, and is, to your point, Mike, I think it's significantly harder to lead now. I mean, when I engage any leaders, and I was in a conversation 2 days ago about data management, of all things, and thinking about all the things that we track and look at, and we're keeping stats on humans now in ways that over time will let us understand the human better. But all of these factors go into leadership versus, in the old days, club and cart kind of thing, where, you wanted to know the fabric of the human, what the mission was, and align to it. And I felt like it was just significantly more straightforward and without, some of the complexities that I think our leaders deal with now. So what you've got is, people who are, to your point, graduating younger in life without that military experience, and in a quick minute, they're team sergeants, and or are leading others. So there's a few things that we're seeing, right? One, these broadening assignments at about the 3-year mark. Coming to the Special Warfare Center in school, as I tell everyone, is a place where you're going to learn who you are and how you lead. People say, no, I know who I am on a team, and I'll argue with them all day and say, I disagree, because, on a team, you're doing a lot of group think. When you're an E7 or senior E6 or an E7, and you're responsible for, 13 lives on a patrol, and all the safety factors and knowledge transfer and everything else, and you have a greater responsibility to the regiment, you're going to figure out who you are and how you lead, and you're going to mature very quickly, because you realize that you're going to have everything you're doing has a tail to it, if you will. And every person you interact with, you're going to inherit when you go back to the operational force. So we're seeing broadening assignments being used better. And I'm really excited about the professional development that's happening in those broadening assignments. And the other thing, after talking to Chuck Ritter and seeing what they're doing at the NCO Academy, really this the concept of getting a whole lot more mentorship going on there, and really the curriculum has been enhanced in just great ways. So we're seeing some of those initiatives also. But I'll tell you that my conversations with leaders will tell you that in some instances, our team sergeants, are 10, 11 years in, and they're E7s. And I think, when you think about an 18 X-ray who's been in 10 years total, and you figure a good, third of that career has been in some professional development, that's a tough leadership assignment, to take a strategic asset or resource forward with your O3 counterpart who's been in about the same amount of time, and your team is relatively young. So we're expecting a lot out of that team, and that's why, again, leadership presence, coaching, building a culture that's right. getting the attributes right, getting development right, and focused on the greater good of the organization is more important now than I think it's ever been.
Wow. I mean, that's certainly a lot to take in. So now that we got you cornered, I mean, having built all of this as a foundation, I wanted to ask you. Okay, so you're a new Green Beret and you're showing up to group. What advice would you offer an NCO or or an officer? I mean, could you tease out a few key points for them to consider as they're showing up to
Yeah,
group?
I think the first thing that I would remind everybody is whether they want to or not, the first thing they're going to do is inspect you, right? I was an E7 instructor at Camp McCall when I learned this lesson. I'd been out for 3 days walking patrols, and Paul, as you remember those days, you were out for 14, 15 days at a shot, and you come back in and you're just pretty nasty. Um, so I came in, and the Army Special Operations Command and the SF Command and SWIC Sergeant Major were all there waiting for me, and they wanted to talk to me about something. So I came in, I hiked and rucked across Camp McCall, because in those days I think we had one truck for each company at Camp McCall. So I'd rucked from out there at Oron DZ back to meet them. I got a call on the radio, says they're here waiting for you. So I hustled across the airfield and got in, covered with sweat. 2 days without shaving, sleeves rolled up because it's hot, and we finished the discussion, and then the SWIC Sergeant Major took me for a walk, and he said, "I want to tell you something." He said, "You're doing a fine job." He said, "But the first thing we do is we inspect you." He said, "And when we get back in the vehicle, and we're riding back to Fort Bragg, the first thing we're going to have to reconcile is why you look like the way you look when we think we've got a professional E7 running training out here." And I said, "Sergeant Major, I've been up for," it didn't matter, right? I had a pretty healthy excuse about, I've been up for 2 days, and we're doing combat training and on and on. But his point to me, the thing that stuck with me is, remember, no matter whether you're walking into a civilian interview 20 years from now, or you're walking into your new team room, the first thing people are going to do is they're going to look at you and they're going to assess you, right? So, first day, right place, right time, right uniform. Be yourself, be confident, but also know that you got a whole career's worth of learning you've got to do as quickly as you can. And I think that's for that enlisted soldier, that's what I'd say. For the commander, I'd say you got a tougher time ahead of you, because when you graduated, we said that you can command an A team, right? Now you're going to get a coach and a mentor there. You're going to get a coach in the form of a team sergeant. You're going to get mentors in the form of your Warren and those enlisted folks. You're commanding on day one, and commanding an A team hasn't gotten any easier by any stretch. So you've got to assert yourself to this point where you're commanding, without compromising the goodness of that organization that is an NCO-led organization. And that really begins with the orientation of who you are, and then a process by which you learn what the team's focus is, and then you learn the personalities on the team and build that critical relationship with your team sergeant very quickly. That has to happen fast. For a new officer going into the company, I would say, go talk to your company sergeant major, right? One, he sees the world, he or she sees the world in a way that no one else does. They have the experience and maturity. They want you to succeed, and they can influence their counterpart across the way. But they also are going to be that person who can tell you, everything about that team from their perspective before you set one foot in the door. For the enlisted folks in that first week, it really is, take it all in, learn and listen. People are going to ask you, your opinion on things. I would default to observations versus opinions in the first, say, month I'm on the ground, and know your own capabilities, and also know your values. I think those things will get you through the door, and then from that point on, it's just, no kidding, be the best teammate you possibly can. Be a better version of yourself tomorrow than you were today. And I think that's the goal that drives us all. And I think when we see that happening in those best teams, they're extraordinary and untouchable when that happens. And the best teams have thought about receiving you professionally and getting you oriented, right? That's a real responsibility of leaders on those teams already, to make sure that they're receiving that talent. And I haven't seen any of the gates that used to be there of, you've got to get through these gates before you're a functioning member of a team. I just haven't seen that in a long time. And I think, we're really embracing the talent from day one, but that's also a requirement to make sure that you're influencing how they fit on your team, and the culture of your organization can't be compromised because you bring in new people on. So it's just a real requirement on both sides, if you will.
Well, yeah, I wish I knew that. Maybe you could, had Bill and Ted and their excellent adventure give me a time machine, travel, and give me those key points before I showed up. So I think I did it the wrong way, but yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you for that. And then I also wanted to get a plug in for your LLC here, Leader Solutions and Decision Support. Can you tell us about that? Can you tell us about your mission and that?
Yeah. So in a nutshell, our mission is to make people and organizations better, right? So we have two business units here. One is what we affectionately know as organizational excellence, which is really the leadership stuff we're talking about. So, we're helping people write strategy and deliver that strategy with effective teams, and through a lot of effort along the way. In fact, we facilitate a lot of offsites. We run a lot of workshops. We help organizations really achieve their goals in that space. The other side of our company is risk mitigation, right? It's everything from keeping travelers safe to managing organizational risk to everything in between. And it's the two together really, I say affectionately, our company is focused in those two areas because that's where leaders spend 80% of their thinking time, and it's where most of their worry resides. And so, when I started the company, it was originally just a tax, place to keep taxes. And then what we found is that the more that we worked, the greater demand that there has been for what we do. And then the other critical piece, much like our soft background, is we don't broadcast, our clients. And our clients are, if you ever get out to the office, it's a pretty impressive group of icons that we have and brands that we have on the wall. But we don't broadcast it. I mean, and because we know that often the work that we do is pretty sensitive, and we're dealing with, structural change, organizational change, or worries of leaders. So, that's people say, why don't we hear more about the clients and the companies you work with? And I'll say that's by design. And of course, that makes it really, really interesting for us, as well as, it means that the right people are on our team. Our team is amazing. When I first started the company, I would have told you that, if you go forward 12 years, that you would see nothing but, two A teams worth of folks out here. And I'll tell you, it's not that way. Our team is 85% women and incredibly diverse, because what we did was about 2 years into it, when we were really just struggling, we decided to relook the way we worked. And it was the soft model. It was let's attract, hire, and promote the best people possible. Full stop. Let's take away biases. Let's take away any of the other things that I thought made someone the right fit. And when we made that adjustment internally, what's come out the other side is an incredibly dynamic, cohesive team that it reflects all of us, and it's a pretty exciting place to be every day. And there's never a dull moment, from last week in Israel to a couple days from now, helping an organization work through their strategy for the future. So pretty neat stuff, and happy to still have a job after all this time.
Yeah, awesome. And for our listeners also, there's the Dynamic Leadership Strategies podcast. I took a listen to the one about after action reviews, and got a lot out of that. Just came out a month ago. Check that out. And so Sergeant Major, we talked about a lot of stuff regarding leadership, some challenges that are facing the SOF community, and then one of those obviously is now that the high tempo of the combat operations that we had in the Middle East are slowing down and are pretty much over. We're facing morale challenges and then moral challenges, and I think today's discussion has really underscored the importance of the SOF attributes, and and maintaining that brand that we have in the Special Forces community. So, I mean, I hope that you guys picked up on that, and if you don't have, as the world becomes more and more complex, probably the most complex it's ever been. It just underscores the importance of leaders sticking to our guns on those attributes, because that's our DNA. We're known for that, and if we lose that, then we lose who we are. And so
I
I
agree.
think it's so important to do that. And I think there was great takeaways for new guys showing up to group. So I appreciate your time today, Sergeant Major.
Yeah, absolutely.
Certainly. And
Thank
Paul,
you for
if I-
coming on.
Yeah, thank you guys. And if I could, for leaders out there, remember, and I think I found this out just a hair too late or a later point in my career, but look, you have to know who you are to start with, and you have to know what your values are. And remember, if you're leading, you are exerting your will on others, right? You are influencing them in a way to achieve the greater good of the organization. And you can't do that if you're not sure who you are and you're not sure of what of the organization and what you believe about that organization. They've got to be aligned. And if you're conflicted, you're not the best leader that you can be. And I think that's the thing that I would leave leaders with. And I think it's important to have, people that you trust, that you can be vulnerable with and to help you sort through when you're just unsure, right? It's not something you figure out by yourself. And I've been blessed to have just incredible leaders around me for a very long time. And every day I learn volumes, and I'd encourage all leaders to take some of that with them.
Well said. So thank you for your time today, and appreciate you always taking time coming out to McCall, keeping us straight. So CSM Terry Peters, God bless you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Pinelander Podcast. If you enjoy our unique content, please consider supporting our sponsors. SOF News, providing special operations news from around the world. It's where Paul and I go to keep abreast of what's going on within the SOF community. Check them out at sof.news. Blacksmith Publishing, been serving the warrior class since 2013. They have great titles written for warriors by warriors. If you're looking for excellent reference material or just want to unwind with a great novel, be sure to check out the bookstore located at blacksmithpublishing.com. And if you're looking for some cool Pinelander apparel, head on over to the general store located at pinelandergeneralstore.com. That's all one word, pinelandergeneralstore.com. Have a great selection of shirts, hats, jackets, sweaters, stickers, patches, artwork, and a whole lot more. Check out the store at pinelandergeneralstore.com. If you're interested in helping develop our country's next generation of warriors, please consider donating to the American Agoge Project. The mission of the project is to foster an environment producing able-bodied citizen warrior men of fine character. And we'll be officially launching the project in 2023 in celebration of Blacksmith Publishing's 10th anniversary. Until our next meeting, stay mentally and tactically smart, physically and spiritually strong, and socially astute. To each other we pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. May God continue to bless Pineland.